Hello, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending upon where you are in the country. We have a lot of attendees to this webinar. Welcome to the webinar. Very happy to have all of you here. A lot of people are joining, so we will just give it a minute before we start. But hopefully, wherever you are, you have nice weather. We have a beautiful fall day here in New Jersey where we are based, and we'll get it started. So I am Rohit Mathur, co-founder of FieldWorker. Um, uh, I come from personal experience with family with disabilities and also experience in technology, which led us to founding FieldWorker. Our mission is to assist people working in care coordination and service delivery to the disabled, and our platform is meant to make the day-to-day life of care providers and the agencies they work for easier, and the caregivers. I'm very excited to have and welcome our guest today, Josh Godown, CEO and founder of Bridges Support Coordination. Josh has dedicated the past decade to building Bridges into a trusted agency serving families across New Jersey. He started his career as a case manager, support coordinator in 2016. He's moved into leadership roles before stepping into his current role as CEO and founder. Under his leadership, Bridges has grown into multiple counties in New Jersey, helping individuals and families maximize their independence and quality of life through community-based resources. In addition to leading Bridges, Josh is chair of the New Jersey chapter of TASH, with a focus on inclusivity and self-direction for people with disabilities. TASH's mission is to ensure people with disabilities are part of policies and decisions that impact them directly. Josh's background is in special education. He earned his degree from East Stroudsburg University, where he is also a student leader. It shaped his belief that every individual deserves dignity, respect, and the ability to design a life that reflects their unique aspirations. And he has said, at the core of Bridges' approach to support coordination is the belief that every person they support is a person with unique needs and aspirations, deserving of respect and dignity. Bridges recognizes the value of empowering people to exercise self-direction and make informed choices regarding the services and support they need, while providing the guidance and resources needed to facilitate this process. So we are very happy to have Josh, and we look forward for him to share his journey with us, his lessons in leadership, and his perspective on the future of support coordination. So welcome, Josh.
Thank you so much. I'm super excited to be here. So thank you, Rohit.
Thanks. Thanks. We will have a couple of housekeeping things. We want to keep this session very informal. It's a conversation. We want to hear Josh's story. We would love to hear questions from the audience. Please feel free to ask your questions. You can type them into the chat window. You can address them to the host and panelists. We will see them. We will address them as we go along. Or if we don't get to them during the session, we'll get to them after at the end of the session. Either way, but we would like to keep this informal. If you ask a question, we are happy to just put that question right up front and answer those. In case, if you want to have a question which is specific to your agency, feel free to drop us an email and we can reach out to you afterwards and have a discussion as well. No, again, friendly, we are all in the same business. We are all here to help people, and that's the objective. We will have a couple of polls that might pop up on the screen during the webinar. And what we want to do is, if you can answer those polls, that will be very good, useful for us to understand where your challenges lie and how we can help them. But without further ado, what I'm going to do is launch into questions for Josh and hear his story. We are very excited to hear from Josh. So Josh, what inspired you to start Bridges Support Coordination, and what vision guided you in those early days?
Yeah, so combination of a lot of different things. I had prior to being in New Jersey and being into support coordination, I had, experience working with folks in community settings. I had experience in group homes, uh, job coaching, individual supports, kind of all over the place, right? I had a lot of different experience. That really shaped a lot of what my views were of working with folks, and ultimately the forming of bridges. Our view has always been looking at people as people, and not looking at people as subjects or things that needed to be fixed. Looking at people, as people that have goals and aspirations, and just like you and I. So that's really what helped shape Bridges, initially, and that mission and value set has carried on, through the past 10 years.
Yes, yes, and Josh, for those who are unfamiliar, could you just share a few points about what Bridges Support Coordination Services does? We have a lot of attendees from outside of New Jersey
Perfect.
as well, and so it might be worthwhile understanding what Bridges does.
Absolutely. So support coordination it's interesting, Rohit. You and I were talking about this earlier. It's the service itself. Service is available, through all the states that offer waiver services for folks with disabilities. Um, but it may be called something different, right? You may have a service coordinator, you may have a support coordinator, you may be called something different. So at the foundation of our role, right, within Medicaid guidelines and within division state guidelines, excuse me, our role is to work and help people, living with intellectual and developmental disabilities, 21 and older, utilize waiver services or waiver funding, to access services, supports, et cetera, in the communities, except, and so on. Bridges looks at it a little bit different, and I think we get into some of this a little bit later. While we recognize all that, again, we notice that, we know the population, we know the folks that we're working for, but again, they're people, so we don't really look at the service end of it, so to say. When meeting with folks, we look at the goals, aspirations, where do we want to go, and how do we want to get there? Like those are the big questions that we look at. But um, from a across the platform type look, from state to state. And welcome, by the way, the folks that are from out of state. It's super cool to have people here from all over. Um, it's really helping people with lived disability experience navigate the adult world.
Yes, yes, yes. And you're primarily working with post high school 21 and plus developmentally disabled adults, helping them access services. And this is as Josh mentioned, this is common across the country. Just may have been called by different names, but essentially the services are available everywhere. Now, since you founded Bridges, Josh, you have grown across the state into so many counties.
Yeah.
Now, we part of this webinar also addresses growth, and I wanted to just delve into the history of this a little bit. That what key moments shaped that growth for you?
There's a lot of them. And I'm not there's a bunch, right? There's a bunch that I could sit here and talk about. Opening up when we started in Warren and Hunterdon counties. Um, I'm living in Warren County. I was more familiar with the area. We started in those counties, and we spread pretty quickly. A lot of our reason for growth, has to do with relationships. It's relationships that we develop with people supported. It's relationships, past relationships maybe that I've had or another coordinator has had, or we support somebody in one area and they have a friend in another area, and the friend's family or the friend hears about us and they call us, and that's really shaped a lot of our growth, and is a lot of our stories. The one that really sticks out to me is along these lines. I had worked with a woman, she and I had worked together in a previous life, and um, I was supporting folks, throughout New Jersey. We're in 13 counties now, across New Jersey. We were not in Monmouth County at the time, but she had called me, and she has two kids, that live with disabilities. and they had a coordination agency and they weren't 100% happy. There were some things going on with the agency, or she needed a different level of support, whatever the situation was. And she called me and we had a long talk. And, she told me what she was looking for, what she expected of her agency. And she had a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience. And she's like, look, I would love for you guys to be our agency. You're exactly what we're looking for. I know you, I know what you bring to the table. I know how you look at things. Um, and that's how it happened. I mean, that's how all of our stories are for the most part. It's not an uncommon thing for us, and it's great.
Yes, 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 of course, of course. And I think it is relationships, as you said, connecting with people,
Yeah.
talking to them, hearing their voice, and they view you then as the leader who's going to help them
Yeah.
navigate the complex path that sometimes these waivers laid out. And
Right.
that leads me into my next question, which is again on your personal journey, is the what leadership lessons have you learned as your agency has expanded?
They're ongoing.
Yes, yes. So,
It's not.
so it's for all of us.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned this in the intro. My time at Bridges, I was a founding person of Bridges. We had started and under my leadership at the time, and I floated around. I've played different roles as we've grown. Yeah, support coordinator, supervisor, team leader. I've developed different roles to fit into executive director, now CEO, and I think in each role I've learned something different.
Right.
And it's been ongoing. I mean, I had an aha moment, as I call them, yesterday with something, and I was like, oh God, like I forgot to, I was trying to do this, but I meant to do this, and in the process, I may have, stepped on somebody's toes, a lot of it is that it's the emotional piece, and realizing that, you're working with people that are working with people, in a leadership piece, right? But it's also looking at the company as a whole, and this was a big thing for me as I took over in the CEO position, looking at the company as a whole, as a company, and sort of balancing what's best for the company, but what also meets the needs of the people supported. Because that's why we're here. We're all here because of the people that we work for, but we also run a company, right? So there's that balancing act of how can we meet the needs of the folks that we work for, but how can we also operate, on a day-to-day as a support coordination agency, and how do I empower the people that are working for me, to make decisions that are in the best value, that follow our values and our mission in the everyday day-to-day relationships, whether that's with the people supported, the state agencies, so on and so forth. So like I said, it's a learning journey for me, for sure.
Learning, humbling, you learn something, you realize how much you don't know,
Yeah.
and you move on from there with a little bit of extra knowledge.
Yeah,
Now,
and also realizing, like, if you have a leadership team or folks around you that are in leadership positions, they're there for a reason, right? Like they've passed a certain test, so to say, and they're in leadership positions, and they have a mind and they should have a voice, and they have ideas that might not align with yours because you're thinking about things one way, but they might have a broader view or a different view. So just learning all of that and being accepting of it and open to listening to other people's ideas because they might have a better idea than you have, honestly. And
yes,
and maybe meeting in the middle somewhere.
sure, sure. Yes, yes, yes. Coming to one of the key topics here in our webinar, uh, Josh, what does person-centered planning mean to you and at Bridges, and how do you ensure that it is just not a phrase or it's more than that?
Yeah, I mean, person-centered planning it's I don't want to say it's simple, but it's keeping the person in the middle of the planning. That's it. It's not, anything that we need formulas for or anything like that. It's, making sure that the person supported has a voice in their supports. Now, with that, we do support folks that do not use their voice to communicate, right? So how does that work, right? That's the question. Like, how do you meet the needs of somebody that does not communicate verbally, right? To make sure that they're in the center.
Yes,
That goes back to relationships. It goes back to knowing the people that you're working for. It goes back to, understanding people's communication styles. I've worked with folks that um, communicate verbally, right? But a lot of times, folks that experience, say, autism, will communicate in ways. I worked with a guy once that would communicate in ways. He was a big Disney fan. I think it was Disney, and 101 Dalmatians. He was a big Dalmatian, 101 Dalmatians. I don't know if that's Disney or not. I'm not up on my movies, but anyway, um, he would talk, and when he would think about something, he would talk in phrases from the movies. From that, you could kind of understand where he was going. And I think the one day he called his mom Cruella de Vil because he was like irritated at her, and we could tell his mood, right? Because he was irritated, and we could tell by that phrase, right? But so kind of keeping that in mind and keeping knowing how people communicate, and just keeping people that are supported at the center of everything. Not having meetings without people. Like that drives me crazy, you know? If we're having meetings about people, it's not person centered.
correct, correct, correct. Absolutely, absolutely. And not to forget that. Is there, I know you already shared an example of the 101 Dalmatians, which is very interesting. There are so many different ways, and can you share another example where, let's say, person-centered planning made a significant impact for a family or individual?
I think person centered planning, if it's done right, always makes an impact. I do. Let me see a specific example. Um, I was part of a was it I guess you could call it part of person centered plan. There's different dynamics to person centered planning and different tools to use, right? um Circle meetings are a big thing. Circle meetings, paths, maps. If we're not familiar with them, we can talk about that a little bit. They're basically graphic facilitations, right, surrounding in-person meetings. So the person supported and whoever they want as part of their team can be part of their team.
Right,
So we did a meeting a while ago, myself and a colleague, and it was called PCAST. I think it stands for Person Centered Around School Transitions. This young guy was 21, 22 years old, exiting the school system. He had already been we had already started supporting him. He is a young man that we continue to support, and he lives um, with a rare genetic condition, right, that does not allow him movement outside of his head, right? He has head movement, but that's it, right? And I say that as I'm moving forward. He does not have verbal communication. He does not speak using his voice. He uses an eye gaze system. Those that are not familiar with eye gaze, it's a way that folks supported can utilize a communication device by moving their head. There's a sensor that's tied to either a pair of glasses or an adhesive that they can put on their head that will allow it acts as a mouse basically, and allows them to navigate internet communication devices, so on and so forth. So a couple years ago, we had a PCAS meeting, which is sort of similar to a circle meeting in some ways, um, and we found that this young dude loved anime. I knew it, but I didn't know how much he loved it. I knew he liked it, but we found he had goals and aspirations of having his own comic book line, his own series. And we're like, wow, like that's really wild, right? So at that point, we're like, okay, so how do we make this happen? Right. So, he had his homework to do, and the team had their homework to do. He's writing his own comic books now.
that is amazing.
Yeah, he's worked very, very, very hard in getting the right people in the right places to support him in this journey. And I think he's on his second or third comic book, and he's partnered with comic book stores to help him sell. Like it's truly that meeting truly made a difference in his life for sure.
Oh, amazing. That is amazing. I mean, the magic of following person-centered planning, keeping the focus on the individual, understanding their needs,
Yeah.
results in remarkable achievements. That is that.
And also, again, looking, and I keep saying this, but looking at them as a person, like I've been in so many meetings with folks that, that the person supported has similar lived experience as this young man, and the view is totally different. It's, well, he can't do it. He can't even talk. Like I've heard that phrasing. It's not for me. But he can't do this because X, Y, and Z. Instead of flipping it around saying, well, he wants to do it, let's figure out how to make it work.
Yes. That's great. That is great. Now, moving on to something slightly different, we'll come back to person-centered planning again. But one of the key requirements is for you, as a support coordination agency, is to help individuals and families maximize their DDD funding and connect with local resources. So how do you do that, Josh?
Um, so community ties is one of them. Knowing the communities that people are working in, and living in. Um, if we don't have ties, we make them. Calling up a, whatever, agency or whatever space and making that tie, or better yet, depending on the person, depending on their support system, supporting the support system to make those ties. Um, as far as DDD funding, maximizing funding, I think that's something that's always a conversation throughout the months that we're working with folks, right? Seeing how services are working, seeing if things are working the way that they want them to, and kind of pinching pennies in a sense where we're able to, in the allocation of dollars and cents in their DDD budget.
Sure. And it's the same thing comes back to, but you have to help the families and the individual navigate the system
Yeah.
as well, right?
Yeah.
It's again keeping the person at the center of attention. You want to make sure that they can derive the maximum benefit and navigate that. So I
Yeah.
guess that may involve coordinating with DDD, which is the Division of Developmental Disabilities in New Jersey for those out of state, and the families and service providers. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, understanding the system, the ins and outs, the in-betweens, and providing all that info to the families up front, is beneficial to, to help them, and empower them, to get to know the system, and understand it as much as they can, within their times. And we realize families are busy and, often working multiple jobs to make it work. So, we try to help where we can.
So, in that note, Bridges, from Bridges' perspective, Josh, and that applies to other agencies as well. What challenges do you feel are most pressing for agencies today, and how are you tackling some of those challenges? If you could pick up a couple, that would be very valuable, I think, to our audience.
Oh, challenges. How long are we here for? The challenges go on. I mean,
This webinar will continue all night.
yeah, there's challenges all the time. Uh, we talk about compliance. I think clarity is a big thing, right? Where it's not, and this is a little bit different than everything that we've been talking about, where we're talking about person centeredness and talking about the person. I'm gonna swivel here a little bit and talk about agency compliance, and unclarity of what compliance is. And yeah, we have manuals to go by, right? But they're 270 pages long each, and we have multiple plus a best practices guide, and you really need time to figure all that out. And who has that time, right? We're on the ground floor working with people, trying to make people happy, right? And move forward in their lives. So I think compliance is one of the struggles, or one of the pressing issues for a lot of agencies. Um, and how to stay, with all this. There's usually not the infrastructure at a lot of agencies too focused on the compliance, right? So you have one or two people that are running the agency and guiding the groundwork, plus making sure on the other side that compliance is right. So again, it's that mesh of how do I stay in the moment, in the present, and work with people, plus make sure everything is compliant on the back end, so that if I'm audited, I got my I's dotted and T's crossed. Um, and skipping ahead a little bit, I think this is where, and I know we get into, some of the AI stuff and technology questions a little bit ahead, but I think this is where, FieldWorker has really helped out with ensuring compliance because of the way their platform is developed. We don't necessarily have to comb through everything the same ways that we used to because a lot of that's already done for us. And in turn, we can spend more time with people and less time on paperwork.
Yeah, exactly. And thank you for that. Yes, that is what we strive to do, make your life easier, and that is where to. Actually, I'm going to segue a little bit. There's a good segue into technology, but as I do that, I'm also going to launch a little poll. It's a one question poll for everybody. It'll be up for a little while. Please feel free to answer this. Gives us some information about, what are your challenges as the audience? What are you facing? And then we'll continue the conversation as we do that. We went into technology. So Josh, is compliance or is there something else? What led you to adopt FieldWorker, and what problem were you trying to solve at that time?
There were a couple actually. Compliance was one of those things that just kind of happened. It was a happy accident, right? From field worker.
Right.
We weren't necessarily going for the compliance piece, but it happened. It was a beautiful thing that came from it. What I was looking to do was decrease the amount of time people were spending on forms and increase the amount of time people were spending with people. Um, for those that are out of state and or not in the support coordination role, our role requires us to meet with folks or talk to folks every month, right? Every 3 months we have to meet with people. Every month we have to have a conversation. For documentation purposes and for billing and Medicaid back end stuff, we have to complete forms that are called monthly monitoring tools. The Division of Developmental Disabilities has decided last year, the year before, to modify the 1 to 2 page form that we had. One, now we have two separate forms and it's totally convoluted the way that it's done. But one is, I think, 5 pages long, and the other is either 4 or 6. I forget which. So my point is, there's a lot of check boxes, a lot of conversations of if you marked yes in the above section, then you don't need to complete this section. Or if you marked yes, complete this section. So there's a lot of different conversation that goes on and a lot of room for non-compliance in those areas. So my main goal was looking at cutting down the time that people are spending sitting here saying, "Oh, I don't know if I should answer yes or no on this," or did I answer yes for C, or going back to it's a lot. My goal was to minimize that, and compliance just happened to come out of it. Um, again, taking paperwork out of the picture is huge for us. The less we can do, the better.
Yeah, and Josh, we find that everywhere, not
Yeah,
just in New Jersey, but other
sure,
states as well, because there is no state which is reducing the amount of paperwork that organizations need to deliver. So
for sure.
paperwork requirements are overwhelming, and this poll that we just ran as well, actually 67% of the people who took this poll said that they are spending too much time on paperwork and data entry than they need to, and they're having 40% said they're having difficulty tracking client progress and outcomes because they
Mm,
just don't have the information. So these are very key, and compliance is, and again, 44% also said that compliance is a big problem. So we are seeing this in the audience. We are hearing that from everywhere. The challenges are the same across the country. There are a lot of changes also happening, and which are impacting us in all kinds of different ways. So this is so important.
yeah.
Now, where do you see technology supporting the mission of support coordination and case management in general? How do you see that? And then perhaps, you can use FieldWorker as an example if you feel that would help.
Yeah. I think as the role and the vision of support coordination it is hopefully shifting a little bit, right? I'm in some conversations, at the state level, and I'm hoping to have some impact in those conversations. But hopefully it's just what I said before, spending more time with people. I would love to see a reduction in paperwork, or a way for that stuff to be filled out, through FieldWorker, if there are, I don't know, a bunch of other forms that are required. Maybe there's some AI, stuff that we could work together through FieldWorker and get some of that stuff done. So that people aren't spending hours and hours and hours and endless hours on paperwork. Um, that doesn't really do anything. Paperwork doesn't help anybody.
Yes, many agencies are still hesitant about adopting technology. What would
Sure.
you say to the leaders who worry the technology might take away from personal or human-centered care?
I get it. I get it. I totally understand. I mean, Ruhi, you and I had this conversation earlier where I think, you have to embrace technology, right? Because it's here. There's not much as one person you're going to do about it. No offense, it's just not going to happen, right? So I think, embracing it, but doing it in a way that, um, eh, where it's applicable, right? Not everywhere. Figure out where it's going to work for you and your agency and adopt it, embrace it, make it work. Um, and if at the end of the day it helps you accomplish the goals that you have of, maybe spending more time with people, maybe not working so much, maybe it's a compliance thing for you, then take the plunge, try it. Technology is not going anywhere. So, but I also think that using it in a way that it's not going to replace people is important, and not saying that that's, a topic of conversation, but I just think there's ways to use it to enhance yourself, and your insight to things or the way you approach topics or whatever. So I just say embrace it and go for it, and um, if it helps you reach your goals, then do it.
And in that regards, it might, do you have a real example of, let's say, how FieldWorker has helped your team become more efficient or improve their service quality?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely cut down time for sure. Again, 4 or 5 pages of a check boxes can be very daunting over time. But I know even the review of them it can be time consuming as well. At Bridges, for compliance reasons, um, we review everything. Supervisors, myself, we review every form that hits our desk, we review it prior to it being submitted to Medicaid, or uploaded to our sites or anything. That's not really standard practice. For us, it is. So the review of, you have several hundred tools to review. Doing it in FieldWorker has allowed us to do it in one space, which is beautiful, right? So a lot of the excuse me, the platforms that are used to store data are either cloud-based or have some sort of hierarchical system where you go into a folder to get into another folder, and then inside that folder there's another folder. And if you're reviewing documents, you're 4 or 5 folders deep into somebody's stuff before getting to the actual document. Doing that 200 times to review stuff is time consuming for sure. FieldWorker allows us to look at all of that stuff in one screen in one platform. It's a lot easier to navigate. Plus, like I said before, compliance. It eliminates the, I don't know if eliminates is the right word because it's still there, but it decreases the need for us to look at the check boxes that don't necessarily need to be checked for that month because it's already done. Um, we still look at stuff, but not as, maybe not as closely.
Yeah, yeah, perfect, great. And just to remind the audience, we have a lot of people in the audience. Please keep asking questions. We are going to address them towards the end. So just type them into the webinar chat, and we are happy to take them as we go along. One of the questions, Josh, we can address this. For agencies or coordinators. So there's a question for agencies or coordinators who are newer to the field. How would you describe the difference between person-centered planning and simply completing an ISP form?
Good question. That's a very good question, especially for folks that are newer. That's awesome. So the ISP is a document that's required to be completed, right? For Medicaid purposes, for state purposes, what have you. Um, the method in which you complete that. So the ISP is the form, right? So let me see if I can break this down. The ISP is the actual form. The person-centeredness is the way that you fill the form out, right? The way that you gather the information to fill the form out. That, but it's also more than that. It's also, person-centeredness isn't about forms, period. You can use the information to create the ISP, but that's not what it's about.
Hmm.
Person-centeredness is about helping the person establish and reach their goals, and move forward, and not just be stagnant, right? Nobody here likes to um, not really have any goals, right? We all have goals in one way or another, right? Whether that's to, summer's coming, I want to get in better shape, or I want to eat better, or I want to go on vacation, or, I want to learn to play the drums. Like whatever your goals are, they're goals. Um, so, helping the folks supported, with disability experience, and getting in those circle meetings and path and maps, and any type of person-centered planning that you can do, to help them, achieve their goals is information for the ISP, but it's not the ISP itself.
Good, good, good. Yeah, that's a very, very good response. Thank you for that.
Cool.
And some people worry that technology could make planning more rigid, but others see it as a way to empower clients. How do you see technology supporting your work?
Um, that's good. I think it does the opposite, right? Like I mean, again, I think, technology has freed us up a little bit to spend time with people. Um, yeah, I mean that's the simple answer to it.
Yep, yep. Now, sometimes individuals aren't sure what goals they want to set. How do you ensure, or how does your team ensure that help them discover what is meaningful for them rather than what others think is best? And this goes back to the person-centered planning, I think, Josh, communication, some of the things that we are talking about. How do people communicate
Yeah,
different
it
things that,
does. And it's also kind of like reading between the lines in a sense, right? And digging, right? Asking those questions that are like leading questions, right? Anybody that's been in interviews, or, has had any experience in that sense, you understand like a leading question. Um, and just yeah, the leading questions, the digging deeper into people's lives and getting to know people, relationships again. I know I've said it probably about 15 times during this segment, but relationships are everything, in what we do, in the world in general. So building the relationships with people will allow you to understand them a lot better, and how they communicate. Um,
yeah.
and
So, so
yeah.
how do your coordinators make sure the individual's voice doesn't get lost among the family providers and other, requirements?
Yeah. So we address the person.
Yes.
We make sure the person's at the table. That's number one. Number one. We make sure that people are seated at the table. No conversations or meetings are held without the person supported.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
we often reflect on the planning process when walking through our plan year with somebody. and we ensure that every step of the planning process and everything that's discussed is done with the person. And it's what they truly want, right? So, and you can tell, if there's people seated at the table and they're a little more quiet, or they're not, whatever, divulging that information. Um, um, there's ways to tell once you build that relationship with people whether they're comfortable in the decisions made, and
Yeah.
whether it's their decision or somebody else's.
Yes, yes. And then again goes back to relationships and understanding, really
Yeah.
reading between the lines. Uh, I'm going to segue into some real world challenges, but and I'm going to put up another poll as well for everybody, for our audience. Thank you very much for answering this. This is another one. We'll keep this up for another 2 minutes while I move on to other stuff. So, Josh, you were, going back to the previous question of communication, you had mentioned earlier in our discussion about this one individual who was nonverbal. I think our audience would love to hear that story from you as well.
I have a couple stories for that. Excuse me while I try to plug my computer in here. 1 second.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stories. And I don't recall the exact one that we were going to talk about, but I can just skip into another one. I was part of a circle meeting a while ago, and um, it was really unique. The person that we were working for does not communicate using his voice. He has a oh, let's see, what is it? How does he? The family knows him, right? The people around him know him. That certain gestures mean different things. He has a they use like I think it's called guided facilitation, where he's able to point to different things, but he needs somebody's hand on him to kind of support him while he's picking the different letters or words that he chooses to use. Um, that meeting was it was just amazing. Being able to sit there and watch him as he went through his process, and just some of the stuff that he was talking about, things that he wanted to do, or experiences that he had had, or feelings, or everything, just kind of brought this whole person centeredness. I mean, I was already in this space, to begin with, but it just reinforced that the saying that just because somebody doesn't have a voice doesn't mean they don't have anything to say. Is totally true. He had a lot to say, trust me. And it was great. It was a wonderful meeting. It totally turned around, and helped a lot of people in his planning team see that how he felt about different things, you know, and felt about the way that people, in the general community, view him, or he wants to be viewed as somebody that's smart, and he is. He's an extremely smart dude. Just can't relay it the way that you and I do.
Yes, yes, yes. That's a great story. And the other one we were talking about was where when you gave a speech, you make a presentation, and this
Yeah.
person nonverbal, right?
Yeah, so that's a good one. So I was presenting last year at a conference, and I don't know, it was a decent size, and there were all types of folks. There were folks from the division, there were people supported, there were family members, agencies, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm presenting, and there was a panel of people in the front, and I had my prompts on screens around the room, and I'm walking around the room because I'm taking questions and answers, as we're going along. And there's a dude sitting next to me. He's next to me in a wheelchair, and I didn't realize it at first. He was motioning like he was trying to hit me because he was trying to get my attention. And I finally recognized that he was getting my attention, and of course addressed him, and he had an awesome question. I forget exactly what it was, but he used a communication device. I'm not even 100% sure how it worked, but it was like on his chair, and I put my microphone down by it, and a computer generated voice came out and asked probably the best question of the day. It was phenomenal. So, um, Yeah, that's just, again, just understanding people and that everybody communicates a little bit differently. And like the story I said before about the Cruella de Vil, even folks that can communicate using their voice communicate differently.
Yep, yep, yep. And that's very important to hear that voice, however it is coming to you.
Yeah.
Keep the focus on person-centered planning. We are actually, I didn't even realize, Josh, this has been so amazing. We addressed some of the questions here that came up from the audience, but really we're running out of time. This is a 45-minute and we are out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to ask one last question,
Sure.
and that's from our perspective. Um, how does a tool like FieldWorker help you ensure that and run your agency well? So that's just a feedback for us. And what I'm going to do, and while you're answering that question, I'm going to put my email address in the chat here. So anybody who's not been able to ask a question or we have not been able to answer, we're going to get back to you and possibly set up a meeting and have a discussion. So feel free to do that. I'm going to drop my email here. Josh, please.
Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think, this has been, one of the themes throughout today. Cutting down time on paperwork. Instead of spending hours and endless hours on paperwork, allowing AI, allowing field worker to, be there to help you through it. Ultimately allows us to spend more time with, why we're truly here, right? People supported.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So thank you very much. I didn't realize the time just flew by. I had more questions, Josh. We'll have to do this again. And the
Yeah.
audience had more questions and we just couldn't get to it. So
Okay.
thank you so much, everybody, for attending this conference. If you have any other questions, I have dropped my email address in the chat. Please feel free to send me. I'll coordinate with Josh and as needed, connect you
Yep.
or happy to answer myself. And thank you very much. Thank you from Fieldworker. Thank you from Bridges for attending this wonderfully informative webinar. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.